Hello, class. We're going to be talking about some elections today and election results. And when it comes to voting in elections in the United States, is basically two types of voting. Okay, there's straight ticket voting, which means that if you're voting for a Democrat for president, you're voting for a Democrat for Senate, the House, state legislature, your local sheriff, all the way down. Okay, and that has become a lot more common in recent years. However, most people still do some sort of split ticket voting, at which they vote for perhaps the majority of one political party, but then maybe someone of the other party for some lower office. And so that's a well documented phenomenon. We're going to talk about today is when people are splitting their ticket, even when it's the same person running for the two different offices. So typically, politicians cannot run for two political offices at the same time. Like you cannot run for the House of Representatives and for the Senate at the exact same time. But there are some occasions in some states that allow you, if you are running for president or even more commonly vice president, to still stay on the ballot for a statewide office. And so this is the moment when your running mate has a backup plan. And in the past 65 years, there have been several instances of this. So let's look first at 1960. 1960 presidential election. The Democratic nominee is John F. Kennedy. And he's a Massachusetts liberal. So to balance the ticket, he has his running mate be Lyndon Johnson, the Senate Majority Leader, Democrat from Texas. And so the state of Texas is highly contested in this election. And Kennedy is going to win by 2 points. However, they make it so that Lyndon Johnson is able to still run for re-election. And so he runs for re-election in the Senate while he's still on the ballot as vice president. And on the vice presidential ticket, right, it's really close. The Nixon people are going to actually talk about fraud. But on this side, for Lyndon Johnson, he's going to win by 17 points, get 58% of the vote. You can see how many counties he's winning. So we can go and put them side by side and compare a 2-point win to a 17-point win. How many more counties Lyndon Johnson is winning? Now, the Kennedy-Johnson team ends up winning the Electoral College and then going in. And so there has to be a special election right afterwards anyway. And if somebody else had run, that wouldn't have occurred. Now, since they already had that law being allowed to run for vice president and for Senate re-election in Texas, this sets something up 28 years later. In the 1988 presidential election. And here again, we have a Massachusetts liberal in Governor Michael Dukakis, and he picks the senator, a Democratic senator from Texas, Lloyd Bentsen. And most people know Lloyd Bentsen because he made that comment to Dan Quayle that he knew Jack Kennedy, you're no Jack Kennedy. And so before the two Reagan elections, in 1976, Texas is a swing state. It's very competitive. President Carter won it by a small margin. So now that Reagan can no longer run, it's thought that Texas might be competitive. So Michael Dukakis is trying to balance the ticket. He has Lloyd Bentsen with him. Now, the issue here is that his opponent is George H.W. Bush, who ran for Senate a couple times himself in Texas, but he is known for his political brand from being from Texas. And it's going to end up being not that close. Okay, close to 1984, but altogether not that close. Okay, it's going to be basically a 13-point win for the Republicans. However, Lloyd Bentsen is able to run at the same time for re-election. And he's going to very easily win re-election. He's going to win by 19 points. So, and there's a lot of people that like what Lloyd Bentsen is doing in the Senate in Texas, but they are less comfortable with Michael Dukakis being president, and there's already the home state appeal that Vice President Bush has. So, if you put them side by side, it's kind of amazing how many, because Texas has an absurd amount of counties, how many counties are splitting their ticket. And it's basically a 30-point overperformance for Lloyd Bentsen over there. So he doesn't really bring to the ticket what the Dukakis campaign wanted. And Lloyd Bentsen's not even going to finish out this Senate term anyway, even though his team doesn't. It's not because he gets elected vice president. It's because he gets nominated to a cabinet position by Bill Clinton. So there'll be another special election there. All right. So in the 2000 presidential election, Al Gore, he's a Southern Democrat from Tennessee. So he's going to put a New Englander on his ticket, and that is Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman. And so in the 2000 election, Connecticut is not considered to be a competitive election. And as you can see here, pretty easy 18-point win by Al Gore. Connecticut's broken up by township. So you can see in the West, Bush having a little bit of strength there. And of course, George W. Bush, his grandfather, Prescott Bush, had 37 years earlier, he had been Connecticut's senator. So the voting base is probably getting a bit old by this point to have like super positive feelings because of the Bushes for that reason. But that's going on there. Joe Lieberman is allowed to run for re-election at the same time. And he absolutely crushes this. Nice. 63%. That's a 29-point win. You can see, I think there's like 3 townships in the entire state that he does not win. And 2000 is an incredibly contested election. It goes to the Supreme Court with the Florida recount. So Lieberman gets incredibly close to having that have been a pointless election, but it wasn't. So if you put these elections next to each other, you can really see how in Western Connecticut, how Lieberman had a lot more crossover appeal than Gore did. All right. And then this is the most recent time that this happened. Barack Obama gets the nomination in 2008 to be the Democratic nominee for president. And he is younger, African-American. He's from the Midwest, so he needs to have something to balance ticket. So he gets the older, more experienced Joe Biden, senator from Delaware, to be his running mate. And Biden has been in the Senate forever. He was first elected in 1972. And so he's going to be able to run for re-election at the same time as being on the ticket for vice president. Yeah, Delaware only has 3 counties. So it's not super obvious, as you can see here on the map. Obama wins 2 and Biden wins all 3. They're both breaking 60%, but you see Biden's doing better than him. But interesting voter there that didn't trust Biden to be vice president, but wanted to continue him to be senator. And then now someone actually in Wikipedia made precinct maps. They're not the exact same colors here, where you can see Biden's home base of Wilmington being this big bastion of Democratic strength. And so downstate, there are places where McCain's doing quite well that are also splitting their ticket for Biden. Now, we don't have any good examples of somebody running for president and reelection at the same time where it's a really clear 1-to-1 margin, and people don't entirely vote based on who the vice president is. But having said, Joe Biden wins this, he gets reelected, and he actually starts his Senate term. He's going to be in office early part of January and resign right before taking the oath of office to be vice president. And, he'd been in the Senate for nearly 40 years at this point, so it meant quite a lot to him. And as you can see here, once again, there's a special election. And this one, the Democrats aren't going to lose it, but this is one of the things that is a risk when people are picking their running mates, is that, and in some states, you can't run two people at once, two campaigns at once, and that could affect the balance of power. So I just thought this was kind of an interesting situation where you have somebody running for vice president and reelection, and people splitting their ticket over the same person in different